Chapter 12. Keeping the Promise. Heaven, paradise, nirvana, all these are words used to describe that place wherein an individual achieves eternal happiness. Images and descriptions of what it will be like range from the simplest of existences to the most extraordinary. Many of those afterlives, as described, sound unappealing, but then, to many, Horizon is likely an insipid reward for the faithful. How can any man who has never yielded up his soul know and understand what it is like to have it kept? And to prolong that joy until time ceases to be? Who would want anything less? I enjoy my life here upon this world, in my flawed mortal body, and I look forward to Horizon, where I will be with my Kaylee forevermore, living in a new body, together exploring all that I did not have time for during my life upon the planet. Our adventures in that new realm will last until time itself ceases to be, and our joy will be abundant.
Kedero, Preface to the 12 Postulates of Inner Peace.
The yawn that punctuated the indigo darkness didn't require light to see. It was loud, and Estolia immediately yawned in response. Come. He held out his hand to her. Let us rest, Estolia. It has been a most adventurous day. First the wreck, then the gathering in of supplies, and then preparing this place to sleep. He sounded as deeply weary as she felt. He began the day by fighting off pirates. He must be exhausted to have done so much in so short a time. She placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the luxurious bed he spent so much time making. Once they were next to it, he stopped and turned her so she was facing him. He settled his hands gently on her shoulders. She could feel the heat emanating from his body. Was this the point where he would assert his right to her body in the night? I will be honest with you, Estolia. I desire you. You may even feel the reaction of my body to yours, but I want you to know I will never do anything without your permission. You are safe with me. She believed him. She closed the gap between them and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head on his chest. Thank you, she told him. They stood together for several heartbeats before she pulled away from him. She bent down and slipped her sandals off. She didn't have anything to wear to sleep in, so she would remain in the soft dress. The bedding, once she settled down into it, was comfortable enough for a king or a pharaoh. She saw Zacharias start to prepare for bed, but fell asleep almost instantly. Estolia woke to the sound of an owl hooting. A bright full moon was shining down on the clearing where she and Zacharias were lying next to one another. His arms were around her. When he moved, she realized he was awake, probably awakened by the same owl. He propped his head on one hand and looked at her, the moon glinting off his eyes slightly. You are an incredibly beautiful woman, Estolia. You are quite attractive as well, Zacharias. Estolia. His voice was gruff, thick. Deity brought us here to be together, to establish a nation together. I wish to follow the dictates of deity and make you mine. She wanted him, wanted to believe what he was telling her. Zacharias, I have heard men say many things to try to get me to couple with them. Why should I believe your words mean anything more than any other man? He was silent for some time, as if searching for the right words to say. When he sighed, he sounded defeated. I do not know how to convince you of my sincerity. He brushed her hair away from her eyes, smoothed it back, and gently caressed the skin of her face with his thumb. I have traveled for 5 years in search of my destiny. I did not know when I was hired to guard the Ankamun that I would be presented with 2 of my dreams at the same time. I wish to make you mine, Estolia, not for tonight or until we are rescued, but for all time. And if you are willing, when the first opportunity presents itself, I wish to wed you. From the moment I really saw you, I knew I had discovered my destiny. I wish to remain here, on this island, with you, until the day I die." "Here?" "Yes, here." He was emphatic. "Deity has given the two of us this land to rule over, to fill with our children and their children. It is our land. We have but to fulfill the dictates of Deity, and we will be blessed all the days of our lives, together." He leaned towards her and kissed her, his lips alive on hers, the warmth of his breath feathering her face as he pulled back. His hand rested on her hip. "Estoliana, Deity has promised us prosperity. Together, this land is ours to rule. I have never wanted anything as much as I want to claim you in my life, as my life. Say you will be mine, my lady, my queen, the keeper of my soul. Create with me here on this island our very own nation." "Here, on Pequeño?" she asked again. She reached up to caress his face. She was tempted to give in to this man, to believe his outrageous claims about the island, about Deity, about her. "We will name our land Estolia," he said. Did he really mean to keep her, claim her, and name a nation after her? Forever? She could hear the wistful longing in her voice. She did not wish to be a transient part of his life, of the nation he claimed he would be creating on this island. "Forever, Estoliana," he whispered, "until time itself ceases to be." He kissed her again, moving his hand from her hip to the small of her back, pulling her body closer to his. She could feel the hot rigidity of his desire against her flesh. "Zacharias." She accepted him, and she knew he could hear it in the way she said his name. He slid his hand to the hem of her dress and pulled it up, his rough calluses rasping over the skin of her thighs and hips. She sat up and pulled the dress over her head, pivoting to place it next to their bedding. He pulled his shirt off, and then lifted his hips to push his breeches off. When he pressed the hard length of his body against her, her heart began to race. She touched him freely, marveling at the masculine body that was, to the touch at least, far more impressive than the stone statue she admired as a young girl. His fingers fluttered over her ribcage, while his mouth explored hers. She caressed his face as his hips slid between her legs, and then she gasped when their bodies merged. They were perfectly matched, their movements in tune with one another, as if they shared the same mind and soul. Her body arched under his, and she felt his emotions flooding through her. His satisfaction to feel her body enveloping his, her soul consuming his. Their voices complemented one another as they both cried out at the culmination of their coupling. A flood of warmth rushed through her body. She pulled him close, wrapping her arms and legs around him, pulling him tight. Just as she needed to know that he would always be with her, from now until time was no longer time, she sensed his own desperate need for reassurance, that she would never leave him.